At 78, Barry Gibb finally tells the truth about John Lennon, and what he says will change the way you see both of them. For decades, fans speculated, were they rivals? Were they friends? Did they ever truly understand each other? Or were they just two musical titans orbiting the same sky, silently sizing each other up? Barry Gibb never spoke about it. Not in interviews, not in documentaries. He kept it to himself, until now. And when he finally broke his silence, it wasn't with drama. It wasn't with headlines. It was with honesty, with reverence, with the kind of perspective that only comes from living through fame, loss, and a lifetime of melody. This isn't just another celebrity memory. It's a long-hidden connection between two legends, a story filled with admiration, misunderstanding, regret, and something deeper. Because when Barry Gibb finally opens up about John Lennon, he's not just telling the truth about a man. He's revealing something profound about himself. Barry Gibb's story doesn't begin in a studio or on a stage. It begins in a cramped, working-class home on the Isle of Man in 1946. No spotlight, no microphones. Just a boy with a head full of sound. His family soon moved to Manchester, England, and then again to Redcliffe, Queensland in Australia. Each move brought upheaval. Each city reset his world. But through all the change, one thing never shifted: his music. From the earliest age, Barry showed a frightening ability to craft melody. Not just mimic popular tunes, but create them, haunting, soulful, complex harmonies that would eventually define the Bee Gees' sound. He wasn't alone. His brothers Robin and Morris weren't just collaborators, they were extensions of him. "We were like one voice split in three," Barry later said. In garages, in kitchens, in echoey stairwells, they harmonized, wrote songs on napkins, practiced until their throats cracked. These weren't hobbyists. These were kids on a mission. But even as their star rose, Barry never stopped watching, listening, studying, especially one group in particular. It was 1963 when it hit him. Barry, still a teenager, dropped the needle on a record, and the room exploded. Not literally, of course, but everything changed. "Please, Please Me" blared out of the speakers like a sonic revolution. This wasn't just a new sound. It was a new worldview. The Beatles didn't just write love songs. They wrote emotion. They challenged norms. They broke molds. And Lennon? Lennon was the dangerous one. The one who didn't blink when the world stared back. To Barry, Lennon represented the kind of fearless expression he craved. He wasn't trying to sound good. He was trying to say something true. And Barry was listening. He studied every lyric, every interview, every nuance of Lennon's public posture and private poetry. The sarcasm, the wit, the sneering intelligence. It scared Barry a little. But it also lit a fire. From that moment on, Barry wasn't just chasing a sound. He was chasing honesty. The first time Barry stood in the same room as Lennon, it felt like standing next to electricity. Late 1960s. A London party packed with rock royalty. Barry and his brothers had just begun to break through. Lennon, of course, was already a god. Barry kept his distance at first. He'd heard stories, how Lennon could dismantle someone with a look, how he cut through flattery like a knife. But then it happened. Lennon strolled over, casually, cigarette in hand, looked at the Gibb brothers, and said something Barry would never forget. "Your harmonies, they're beautifully strange." It wasn't exactly warm, but it wasn't cold either. It was Lennon, and it was the only approval Barry ever needed. Years later, Barry would describe that moment as electric. It wasn't about bonding. It was about recognition. For a kid who once listened in awe, that glance meant everything. Fast forward to the late 70s. The Bee Gees aren't just famous. They own the charts. Stayin' Alive, Night Fever, How Deep Is Your Love. Their falsettos are everywhere. Barry's songwriting is unstoppable. The Saturday Night Fever soundtrack becomes a cultural bombshell. But with fame came backlash. Rock purists sneered at disco. Critics sharpened their knives. And one of those critics, John Lennon, in a 1979 radio segment, Lennon made a flippant remark, mocking the Bee Gees' new look and sound. Called it overdone. Said it lacked soul. For Barry, it was like being slapped by someone you'd once idolized. He didn't respond. Not publicly, not then. But privately, it hurt. The boy who once played Beatles records in his bedroom was now the target of Lennon's sarcasm. And still, he never stopped admiring him. The truth didn't come out until years later. Barry was in conversation with a producer who'd worked with Lennon. And casually, the producer said, "You know, John really liked your writing." Barry froze. He did. "Oh yeah," the producer replied. "He said your hooks were lethal." More stories trickled in. Quiet admissions from Lennon's circle. Turns out Lennon had often praised the Bee Gees, just never to their faces. That was Lennon's way. He wore sarcasm like armor. Affection was hidden beneath the barbs. Barry finally saw it clearly. "I think he respected us," he said. He just didn't know how to show it. December 8th, 1980, the night music dimmed. Barry was in Miami, laying down tracks in a studio when someone burst in with the news. John Lennon had been shot. He dropped everything, fell silent. It felt like the world cracked, Barry later said. He didn't just grieve as a fellow musician. He grieved as a fan, as someone who owed something to Lennon's fire. That night, Barry drove aimlessly through the city. Radio stations played nothing but Beatles. People wept in the streets. The man who once made the world feel seen was gone. And in that moment, Barry realized something. Lennon didn't just sing to the world, he sang for it. The years after Lennon's death weren't kind. In 1988, Barry lost his youngest brother, Andy, to a tragic decline that still haunts him. 15 years later, Maurice died unexpectedly from complications during surgery. And in 2012, Robin passed away from cancer. Suddenly, Barry stood alone. The harmonies were gone, the laughter, the sibling telepathy, all gone. But Barry did what he always did. He wrote. His 2016 solo album, In the Now, was different. Quieter, more vulnerable. It wasn't for radio, it wasn't for charts. It was therapy. In interviews, Barry said Lennon's brutal honesty helped guide him through that pain. "He taught me," Barry said, "that it's okay to be angry in a song, to bleed a little." And now, decades later, Barry Gibb isn't hiding behind politeness anymore. John Lennon wasn't easy to like, he says, but he was impossible not to respect. He describes Lennon as a mirror. He showed us who we were, whether we wanted to see it or not. Barry doesn't pretend they were close, but he does admit that Lennon's influence helped shape the Bee Gees in ways even he didn't understand at the time. After John, Barry said, I stopped asking, what do people want to hear? And started asking, what do I need to say? That shift changed everything, from the Bee Gees' final albums to Barry's legacy as a solo artist. Today, Barry Gibb stands not just as a survivor of pop's most turbulent decades, but as a living chronicle of everything those decades dared to dream. He stared down the collapse of vinyl, the birth of streaming, and the wildfire of disco backlash, yet still found ways to spin grief into melody. He watched entire genres fall out of fashion, then circle back around wearing new clothes. And through it all, he kept writing, kept singing, kept pushing falsetto flights no one else could quite copy. He also watched his family shrink. One by one, the voices that once braided into his own fell silent. Andy's bright tenor, Maurice's warm rumble, Robin's tremolo cry. Each loss felt like another instrument dropping out of an orchestra, leaving Barry to carry the tune alone. Most artists would have bowed out. Barry kept going, threading their absent harmonies into every new chord he struck, turning sorrow into a softer kind of strength. Yet perhaps the most poignant piece of his journey isn't what he performed on stage. It's what he finally confessed off stage. Because in opening up about John Lennon, Barry handed us something rare, one legend saluting another without vanity, without spin, without the armor of polished PR. No clickbait feud, no revisionist history, just an honest reckoning with admiration and unfinished conversation. Two icons, two rebels, Two men who carried the emotional freight of entire generations. Their orbits brushed only briefly, but the wake of their collision changed pop forever. Lennon taught Gibb that sincerity could be razor-sharp. Gibb showed Lennon that lush harmony could still cut to the bone. Today, their legacies swirl together on late-night playlists and dusty record sleeves, proof that great songs never respect the limits of their own eras. Listen closely the next time "Stayin' Alive" spins at a party or "Imagine" drifts through a cafe. Under the Bee Gees' shimmering falsettos echoes Lennon's challenge to tell the truth. Beneath Lennon's piano chords, the Bee Gees' fearless commitment to pure, emotional hook. Their music still converses in a language only the heart fully understands. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of Barry's memory, Lennon's voice continues to linger. Your harmonies are beautifully strange. Decades later, as Barry steps off stage and the final spotlight fades, he nods to the empty air, finally ready to answer, "They were strange, John, and they were beautiful, because they were ours."